which is a third-party chat program. And then we also have OCLC VIAF, HathiTrust, and WorldCat. These are kind of global library sources that provide lots of data that might be relevant to people based on what they're searching in our system. And then we also have Third Iron, which is a company that provides direct PDF downloads of scholarly articles. So rather than having to log into a database and try and find the article, you can just do a single click and get a PDF of most articles that you would be interested in. So that's the diagram. Again, not so much interconnected. All of these we access via APIs and pull back at relevant points in the experience. All together, this is what it looks like. So all the different components that I talked about before, how they all interconnect. And as I mentioned, we have 2 of these indexes. And as we do more development, we will add more. We're currently working on getting our finding aids migrated over to this platform too, where we'll do another index like you see up there. So in keeping with a flash talk, that was short. Any questions?
Any questions in the room, just raise your hand. I'll walk a mic over. Anything online? I have a question for you then.
Yeah.
When you're architecting something like the search system, when you buy a product, they'll give you a white paper with, if you have this many users, you need this much memory or this much server. How did you do capacity planning for something you were building?
That's a good question. It basically comes down to a lot of synthetic benchmarking. And we actually did a lot of testing and a lot of data gathering while doing synthetic benchmarks. And that's for the stuff we manage, and it's easy to scale that. Vendors are a bit trickier. Most of them are pretty performant. Sometimes ones will put in API request limits, and we have to try and work around those. So.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, David, very much.
Right.
Oh, wait, sorry, we do have Zoom questions.
Yeah, from the chat. Are you able to consult with other researchers on campus? We have several projects that use similar tools. Scaling and load balancing is difficult for them right now.
Always happy to answer questions. Feel free to reach out to me directly. Yeah, happy to help out and share our experiences. All right, thanks everyone.
Next up, we have Mary Murphy, holding a Master of Library and Information Science and a Master of Science in Educational Leadership and Policy. She is now a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. That's very fancy. As a research cyber infrastructure specialist and service lead for the LabArchives Electronic Lab Notebook here at UW-Madison, she's here to talk about using LabArchives Electronic Lab Notebooks to enhance research collaboration and data security.
Okay, I'm gonna make it so you can actually continue. Yeah, just use the arrows.
Well, you've made it to that magical post-lunch zone where blanket forts, juice boxes, or a nap might sound more tempting than audit logs and access requests. So let's shift gears, take a deep breath in and exhale, and just drop your shoulders for a moment or two. So instead of giving you a typical tech talk, I'm going to tell a story, because that's what LabArchives Electronic Lab Notebooks allow researchers to do. And yes, it's told in rhyme. Not to be cute for cute's sake, but because sometimes rhythm helps us understand systems in a more human way. Along the way, you'll see storybook-style illustrations. They're AI generated, but inspired by picture books many of us grew up with. The vibrant textures of Eric Carle, who give us The Very Hungry Caterpillar, the gentle warmth of Ezra Jack Keats and his timeless The Snowy Day, the expressive charm of Mo Williams, creator of Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, and the playful energy of Leywin Pham, who illustrated The Princess in Black. So settle in, let your grown-up brain relax just a little. Let's step into the world of research and rhythm, where stories help systems come alive. Welcome, I'm Mary Murphy, here to share a tale of research integrity and lab archives, our proven trail. Today we'll explore LabArchives, our trusty ELN, at UW-Madison, where great science begins. First, you'll see how LabArchives keeps integrity strong, where data still sleeps. Next, real yet fictional use cases, stories galore. Show you features and workflows that soar. And lastly, how RCI is on your side. With training and help, your data's your pride. Research data, oh what a sight. It's notes, codes, and images bright. Data collected, observed, or made to answer questions, discoveries laid. Data integrity means trust you see, that your data is honest as can be. Reproducibility means others can do what you did, repeated true. It didn't come in through, that's right. To see these concepts bright and bold, a curious quest will now unfold. In a city alive with a hum and a drum, urban farms bloomed where cement used to come. A lab studied rooftops, raised beds, and herbs, exploring how city-grown greens brought new superb. They had biologists, coders, and folks in white coats recording their findings in scribbles and notes. But data in silos, its true path got lost. Rebuilding their work came at a cost. They turned to a notebook, electronic and wise. They helped them collaborate, organize, and rise. With templates for trials and spots for their plots, their data stayed tidy, no tangled up knots. Each change is recorded, no edits erased. Their work stayed protected, securely in place. With folders and sign-offs and structures to guide, their data could travel and nothing to hide. And when others repeat the steps they took, they'd find every note tucked safe in their book. Their lab kept on growing, new students came through with custom permissions and folders anew. New labs signed up, but before the first page, they contacted the ELN staff to get on the stage. It scaled with their needs, no matter the size. LabArchives selects what a helpful surprise. They reached out to Mary in the ELN crew, who guide and support all the users too. With onboarding, consulting, and training in tow, they helped every lab get ready to go. They worked with a partner across the state line, but syncing their notes worked perfectly fine. With cloud-based notebooks all safely secured, their multi-site teamwork easily endured. Though patient data was not their big aim, some health-related surveys still entered the frame. A question or chart with identifiers few, the ELN tracked it, as good systems do. LabArchives at UW-Madison is HIPAA approved, so even rare PHI can be safely used. With audit trail signatures, compliance in mind, they kept all their research ethically aligned. They logged in on phones while out in the field, collecting results with productivity sealed. From rooftops to soil, their notes were in hand, no matter the spot, no matter the land. Now one postdoc moved onto a brand new lab with notebooks and results, a tidy grab. With sign-off and place from departments and PI, she took a full copy held proudly and high. And lucky for her, the new place she went used LabArchives too. What a great event. She logged in again and picked up with grace a seamless transition to a new research space. They pooled their findings from the rooftops and rows to study the herbs and the food that we grow. What methods help nutrients reach their height? Which setups went wrong? Which ones went right? Their ELN held the whole lab's past story, a trail of trials, some dumb, some dull, and some glory. The LabArchives doesn't compute or plot. It stored every method, every insight they'd sought. Their code came as HTML, neatly and clean, a file to download a visual scene. No sensitive data, just logic and scripts, then uploaded to GitLab with workflows and tips. No secrets, but stories like well-kept guides with steps and the why all laid out with pride. They searched through their records with ease and delight. The built-in search made the queries just right. From images and text and results to text and results from the field, nothing was hidden and all was revealed. Each edit and comment, each note they revised was logged in the history, no need to disguise. The activity log kept the versions in view, no progress and changes were transparent too. At UW-Madison, labs have it great. Free for all members, no need to wait. Unlimited notebooks, no cap on your store, just 4 gig max per upload, but you can add more. Nothing deletes, it just hides from your view. A record preserved for the work that you do. It's structured, compliant, and always on track, so your records keep marching and never look back. So whether you're coding or planting with cheer, LabArchives will follow from year into year. Your stories of science, each trial and tests, secure and well-ordered and told at their best. That concludes our tale of WinLab's quest of trials, support, and data expressed. Oh, double, sorry. There you go. But science like this with compliance and heart relies on a network, each playing a part. So to our IT and tech-minded friends, the impact you make just never ends. So join the support, connect researchers with care. Your expertise matters, and we're glad that you're there. From ELN team to features refined, you can help keep research ethically aligned. At UW-Madison, discoveries insights, thanks to the folks who help keep systems right. Be happy to take any questions.
That was amazing.
Thanks.
Anything online? Not yet. Yes, very much appreciated. That was fun. Questions from the live audience? I think the verse worked. We know. Excellent.
This is maybe because I support more social science researchers. How much does it take to kind of get started with like a lab archive? Like what's kind of like the, getting
process.
started. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to view that, but really a research lab can come and request access. We have a website, it's eln.wisc.edu, and they can go and request access to the notebook, and we will set up an onboarding. The team on the site here and we're always looking for more help, so that ending was if you're interested in supporting, we're more than happy to have you. So we'll send up like a one-on-one consulting with researchers that can be any form. That might be a team meeting, that might be an individual graduate student or a PI. So that's like the training piece. In terms of a lab actually getting onboarded themselves into the notebook, it depends on what work they've done offline, right? So like what processes have they done What systems have they been using? Google Drive, Paper, is it Evernote? So there's a lot of different a lot of people are moving digital anyways. And so looking at where they're at and what they've been doing and see if that translates to the lab notebook here. And if they've not done that work of already working digital, it does take a little bit more lift. The hardest part I have found is the labs actually sitting down and figuring out what their workflows actually look like. And that's actually my favorite part, considering I have a black belt. And so I always try and sit with them to figure that with them. So understanding how do we actually want to organize the folders? How do we actually want to, do we want to create templates for the pages and duplicate it each time we add a new student? So it's really that organization piece. The nice thing about the electronic lab notebook, it's very intentional. I think of the concept back in the day was to convert that paper notebook to digital. And where in the paper notebook, you're writing your observations, you're used to like paste the graphs that you created. And so the difference between LabArchives and say Google Drive is that it is entry based. So you need to add each entry into your notebook. You cannot data dump things and have them dissipate to the black box of unknown. And then once it's in LabArchives, you can then also search it if you can't figure out, if your organization started well, and then as research gets messy, the notebook gets messy, it's just bound to happen. And so it is easier to find your items. And so it's kind of based on the lab of, do they understand how they're already managing their data? What's their processes in place right now? And understanding that work before actually putting it in the notebook. So hopefully that helps a little bit. A lot of people have mentioned they've never heard of LabArchives at UW-Madison. It has been around for a little over 10 years. The company is even older than that, but we've owned it here for quite some time. It's mostly word of mouth over the years of researchers using it.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Mentioning that, stuff sticks around forever, even if it's already hidden. How is it, is a PI able to specify an expiration date, saying I actually need this data deleted because it's a human subject, or we're going to delete it after study? How does that work?
That's a great question. I don't know of any set retention policies that you can create within the system, but the great thing about LabArchives is that you can create, I call them index pages. So like you'd have that page writing what that retention policy should be. So then you can go and do it. And so it's really a centralized location for that story from the entire research life cycle from beginning to end. So identifying when should those items be removed, or like right now, my future project is figuring out the archiving of these notebooks and what that process looks like. Oftentimes, as mentioned in the little story, researchers move to other institutions. The original stays here and they can take a copy with them. But what happens to that original is something I'm working with. So it doesn't have like a set metric that it will just turn it off, but you could at least keep track of all that in one place.
Anything else online?
Happy to talk to anyone who's also interested later on.
Thank you, Mary. Amazing. Our third and final flash talk today is presented by Lindsay Bolin. Lindsay is the lead ITSM engineer at the School of Medicine and Public Health. She's currently overseeing the implementation of Atlassian Cloud as a unified service management platform for the whole school. In April 2025, just a month ago, she earned the Atlassian Certified Administrative Expert designation, and that is many courses. That is not one thing. That is a combination of many. That's a big accomplishment. So, Lindsay, go.
Thank you. Dang it, sorry. I wanted to put it in present mode.
I could have stalled longer.
Presenter view. There we go. Aha.
Actually, while we're waiting, just quick show of hands out of curiosity. Who in here has a degree in something other than computer science? Oh, cool. So I'm not alone. So my degree is in social work, which is why the topic of my presentation is social work. So I've often felt kind of self-conscious about my lack of formal tech training. I knew that my social work degree helped me out, gave me kind of a boost with sort of the empathetic customer service. It really improved my soft skills, but it didn't really seem to have any real application to the more technical side of my job. So for a long time, I looked at it as sort of wasted time. But I've recently realized that that isn't actually true. This presentation cannot teach you how to be a social worker, and I do not intend to put forward that my approach is somehow superior to formal service design techniques. I only want to show you how I've adapted what I thought was a totally irrelevant skill to serve my needs and maybe inspire you to re-examine your own quote unquote irrelevant skills, which might be providing more value than you realize. So I don't want to go too deep into social work lore, but I do want to start with the foundational philosophy, which is called systems theory or sometimes ecosystems theory, because that has really remained my foundational philosophy for the work that I do. So real basic explanation of systems theory is that it's an understanding that individuals are part of complex interconnected systems which govern and influence every aspect of our lives, such as thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. You've probably heard the phrase, a man is not an island, which usually means that no person passes through life without being affected by other people, by the house they live in, by their family, by their friends, by the subjects that they study, or the work that fills their days. But if you think about it, the metaphor still doesn't really work. Even an island isn't truly alone. It's subject to weather patterns and the tides of the ocean that it rises from. So there are three key concepts of systems theory. Wholeness is pretty simple. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. No system can be understood by just looking at the individual elements that compose it. Looking at only one symptom in a presenting problem isn't going to get you to a diagnosis. Relationships mean that the pattern and structure of elements in a system are as important as the elements themselves. A number of different factors may be correlated to the breakdown in a system, but we often find that the cause comes from how those factors interact with each other. And finally, homeostasis. A living system seeks balance to maintain and preserve stability. This usually comes across as like a fear or refusal to change. Unlike other therapeutic approaches, which tend to focus on fixing the individual, which is also known as the medical model, social work looks beyond the individual to the systems affecting their lives and seeks to reform those systems in addition to or instead of just fixing the individual. So how does this theory become practice? The person and environment framework. And I realize the text might be a little bit small, so I'll just read it off. This is only an example. There are a lot of other systems that could be influencing an individual. So in the center, you have the person. Surrounding them are the systems that may or may not be affecting whatever their presenting problem is. It could be their family system. It could be the social services system, a political system, an employment system, religious system, economic system, educational system. Some social workers will use this literally as a worksheet to fill out with the client, and some use it simply as a guide for steering the conversation. You might find if you go to see a social worker as your therapist, even though you have a specific problem in mind that you want to talk about, you probably aren't actually going to get to that problem for the first 2 or 3 sessions because they're mostly working on this. They're gathering your context, kind of almost filling out a biography for you. So let's take me as an example for this. I did not arise a fully formed ITS engineer from a split in my father's skull, obviously. The choice I made to become an ITSM engineer was influenced by the systems in my life. I was born into a family that values public service. As a result, I studied social work because I wanted a career rooted in helping people. I took a job in tech after graduating because I needed the money and I liked tech. And then I stayed because I'm good at it. and I still want money. All of these systems helped push me into this job. So for a social worker, if a client walks in and tells you, I can't feel happy and I struggle getting out of bed in the morning, you could just say, sounds like depression. Under the medical model, you would prescribe an antidepressant and then send them on their way. But what happens when they're back again in 6 months with no improvement or even worse off than they were before? Maybe their health insurance doesn't cover the antidepressant. Maybe they were fired for being late on all of those days that they struggled to get out of bed. Maybe the serotonin levels in their brain were normal, so the pills did nothing. Maybe the pills were working, but a close family member recently passed away and now they're grieving. This framework helps a social worker build a context for their client to deepen their understanding so that they can provide the best possible care. So, framework is obviously not a one-to-one translation. I don't counter many laptop purchasing processes that interact with a religious system, but I try to keep the concept of an individual interacting with and influenced by the systems around them front of mind when I sit down for something like a process improvement consultation. When you talk about service management or process improvement, it immediately puts people on the defense. If you guys have not seen Office Space, watch it. But this is a screenshot of the Bobs, and what they asked every single worker that they talked to was, so what exactly do you do here? It was very threatening and aggressive. Just hearing the word process improvement seems very aggressive and offensive, so I try not to use that word. They're thinking of service level agreements and metrics, numbers that seem to exist only to punish you for not being a robot. They hear the question, why do you do things this way as an accusation and clam up? This might be a bad thing to admit, but I don't care about metrics at all. Leadership cares, I don't. I usually don't even look at the metrics of a process when I start talking to somebody about improving it or turning it into a ticket. I'm not interested in a step 1 through 7 breakdown with perfectly defined roles and completion goals timed out to the millisecond. I usually start by asking them to tell me a story. Yesterday, you onboarded a faculty member. How did you find out they were hired and what they needed? A specific case is often easier to remember, and by not focusing on describing the generic step-by-step process, I find that people will naturally call out deviations from the norm. Most people don't tell a story in a perfectly chronological order, but even that can tell you something about the process because of where and how the disparate steps come up in the narrative. I also do my best to never ask why. Most people will explain themselves without realizing that's what they're doing. I was rushing through these orders to get them on Keith's desk before the weekend. It's baseball season and he never shuts up about the Cubs. I'm also usually not sitting in some kind of looming silence. I'm actively listening. I might not say, why did you do that? But I'll ask questions and prod when it's needed. One of the things that you are taught as a therapist is a lot of what's going on is not in the words that people are saying. It's in the way that they're saying them, it's in their body language, and it's in the things that they're not saying. The systems live in kind of the extraneous details, the annoyed aside about the distracted coworker, the description of the long walk down to an inventory room and back, and the digression into how the AC is always cranked too high. The process isn't just who does what and when they do it. So the other side of service design is customer journey mapping, and I start the same way with stories. In this case, I do offer an explicit prompt of one positive experience and one negative story, because both have equal value in guiding me towards improvement. People tend to remember very few details about positive experiences and way too many details about negative experiences, so gathering one of each really helps me dig through for the average. The customer story sometimes ends up being more linear than the service providers because the customer doesn't know and doesn't really care about all of the steps between the start and the end. They probably don't even know who is involved in all of those steps. They focus more on the how and the when, and often the same systems can affect both the provider and the customer in different ways. Keith's baseball obsession is still a problem for the customer, they just don't know that it's Keith. They know that it doesn't matter when you order a laptop, you're not getting it until a Monday 2 weeks later. I'm also listening for needs versus wants, so I can focus on prioritizing the customer's needs to match the provider's capabilities. Customers tend to think every want is a need, and they can have big feelings about not getting everything they ask for. So I'll find myself employing another therapy technique of de-escalation. It's important to acknowledge that their feelings are real, but not every feeling is appropriate or valid to express. So in social work, you're reminded to not practice outside your scope. I'm not a social worker. I haven't studied any of this for about 10 years, but that training hasn't faded. And a lot of what I learned, I've employed in small ways across my work. The two sources for this presentation were actually two textbooks written by a professor that I was lucky enough to have in the last 2 years of his career. Charles Zastrow is kind of like the godfather of social work. He writes pretty much every textbook that a social worker uses. And he was a fantastic teacher to have. He told us that the most important part of dealing with other people was to always assume that the person you're interacting with is doing the best they can that day. And that has made it a lot easier for me to deal with people who are a little angry, a little aggressive. I don't assume that it's about me. I assume that there's something going on for them, and this is the best that they can do today. So it's important for me to meet them with the best that I can do that way. This human-centric approach is still very important to me, and I truly believe that it makes my work better. So if parts of what I've talked about seem relevant to you, great, use it. But I do hope more than anything, you are inspired to examine yourself and maybe start to see where your non-technical skills are boosting your work. That's it.
Thank you, Lindsay. Questions from online?
Good.
Yeah.
Social work likes to be affirming.
What's interesting, this is how I've actually explained my work to people outside IT, and I say I'm a social worker for the IT department. I'm a business analyst, and lo and behold, I've now met a social worker out in who works for the IT department. Thank you.
Yeah, Robert, you and I need to get together and just create an IT social worker department.
We're doing it.
I know that social work and mental health can be kind of an awkward thing to talk about in a large group. So if you do have questions that you're feeling a little, I don't want to ask this in front of a lot of people, feel free to find me afterwards. I've been told my hairstyle is distinct and I can be spotted from quite a distance. So just look for this.
That concludes our flash talks today. I think we're a little ahead of schedule. I believe 2:45, this room will have, is the networking in this room, I believe. And then there'll be some other sessions going on. So enjoy your extra 3 minutes, I guess.